I guess just for people who are watching live or who'll watch it back, the purpose of Inspo is to motivate and inspire people to make good career choices. The purpose of Career 7 Live is really about, I guess, giving people the tools to empower themselves to make good career choices. However, sometimes tools in their own right can be just kind of theoretical and hard to apply in real life. So Career 7 Live was all about bringing people who've got great career stories to speak to you and to share the insights that they've got along the way in their journey around making great career choices. So with that in mind, I'm absolutely thrilled to have a friend and former colleague Niall Cogan join me. Niall, it's a pleasure to spend a bit of time chatting with you here.
Great, John. Thanks for the opportunity to speak. I'm really looking forward to it. Actually, it's lovely to kind of step out of the day-to-day job and do something different, refreshing, interesting, and hopefully people get some benefit from it. So it's even the act of actually thinking about some of the friendly questions you're going to ask me, and just even the reflecting about it has been nice. Again, it's very different to kind of the day-to-day job. So it's lovely to step outside of that for a little bit and do something interesting.
Yeah, and it's funny now, it makes me think that sometimes it's not something that we as people do enough, let's say. So hopefully this 30 minutes or so will help people step kind of outside their box of just the day-to-day career, and maybe hopefully get some good reflection and food for thought. Before we kick off, Niall, maybe even just for just a minute or two, so that people have a bit of context from what you're going to share, if you would just give people the high level sense of the career journey that you've had to today, please.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely delighted to. So I've been working full-time without sort of putting an age or a decade on me, in around 20 years or 2 decades, shall we say. I've spent the majority of that in professional services, have made a career move in the last 2 years. So happy to kind of talk about that and some of the thought process around it, if it's helpful for people. So yeah, about 15 of the last 20 years in professional services. Made the move a couple of years ago. Would have started with a very traditional route of training as an accountant, similar to yourself, John, and very quickly after that moved purely into taxation, and have specialized in taxation for about 15 years, and would have moved at a time actually when we were riding the wave of the Celtic Tiger, and very much fell off that wave quickly. And again, a great life experience which I'd kind of love to share as well. If I give a bit more kind of granularity on what I do, it's the best way to describe it to sort of people who aren't familiar with what the hell is taxation. I describe it as kind of a fixer. You're not a lawyer, you're not an accountant, you're sort of a little bit of both, and you're trying to bring in both those together. So it's a fixer. It's trying to solve problems with some level of law-based and some level of sort of accounting, finance-based. So it's that kind of hybrid piece that I really enjoy, and that's why I enjoy it so much.
Class. Okay, thank you, man. It's good kind of scene set in terms of the different parts of the journey that's made to where you are today, and I almost love. Thank you for almost giving a simple definition for people, because actually, let's even just start with that. Sometimes it can be hard to know the reality and what a possible choice option really is and really means. Exactly, to know what taxation is, to have it simply defined. In your experience of making career choices, how important has it been to get a good understanding of what it is you're actually considering to be able to make a good choice in those different junctions?
Yeah, I think it's something you put more value on and you invest more on and do more diligence. The older you get, and I guess the more senior you get. If I'm being brutally honest, if I kind of go all the way back to kind of career choices, it was probably more around the next. If I think of sort of my own sort of change in mindset, it was very much the next job, and actually what did that look like, without, if I'm being honest, without really knowing what that entailed, because as I said, it was very much heading in a different direction, going from mainstream finance to taxation. They're broadly all within something to associated with dollars or euros. They're very, very different kind of disciplines within one overarching what you might call finance, or accounting. So certainly in sort of the initial moves, it was less diligence, a bit of a leap of faith. You didn't know till you were there as to what the hell you were going to do, and that was okay, and that was kind of commensurate with, I guess, the roles I was taking on, maybe to what I compared to my more recent move, where you're you're very clear on the role you're being asked to do, and I certainly see the kind of the interview and the recruitment process as kind of a two-way street. You're selling yourself, they're selling you, and actually you want to make sure it works on loads of levels, technically, culturally, personally, et cetera, et cetera. So definitely over the course of the career, can definitely see that mind shift to less diligence, leap of faith, to sort of full scale diligence. And certainly in more recent years, it's when you talk about that concept of career choice, I see it less around a job in terms of our current job versus it's actually more around how can I continue to invest in myself? What skills do I have? What strengths do I have? What would I like? What do I see in others? What do I think would benefit me? So it's more around actually where can I get the opportunity to invest in myself and others more, and actually that's almost job agnostic or sort of employer agnostic. It's actually for me, what do I want to be doing and what experience we want to be getting. And I think any sort of career choice or sort of change in job is really just allowing you to affect that, as opposed to maybe the other way around.
And I love that. And perhaps maybe just to touch on that for a second, Niall. So like for a lot of people, there's a bit of like, how do I know what it is, the experience that I want to be building my career around, or, the type of work. How have you found yourself kind of getting an understanding of what that looks like for you?
It's kind of in one or two words, it's definitely self-reflection. Now, I think that means lots of things for lots of different people, from the sort of the very unconscious to the conscious to the structured to the unstructured. And I think as you sort of become older and hopefully wiser, that sort of process changes a lot. But I think it's definitely sort of self-reflection around, as I said, it's sort of looking at yourself. And I'm certainly, again, if I go back in some of the learnings over the years, if I go back to say the first 5 to 10 years of my career, certainly the first 5, I was definitely guilty of times of working very hard, and I was lucky working with very large organizations, but what they allowed you to do, if your sort of personality trait allowed you to sort of do it, was you didn't really have to think too hard actually about your career, because there was a little bit of a yellow brick road, and actually once you kept doing what you're doing and working hard, that allowed you to progress without really thinking too much about it, and without actually making I'm a big fan of sort of the analogy, doing nothing is a choice in itself, right? So if you're staying in a job and progressing through a role, that is a choice in itself, and it's actually something you're either actively or passively doing or not doing. So certainly, if I kind of stand back, there was a time where I was working very hard in the day job. I would have done a lot of sort of tax lecturing. So your working week was very, very long. I could justify that to myself, that I was working very hard, and from the outside looking in, geez, his career is growing great. He's doing really well. But actually, what it allowed me to avoid was actually reflecting on my career and actually what do I want to get out of it. So it's not that it disserved me, but actually it was probably a period in the career where I wasn't really doing that self-reflection, because I had lots of good reasons not to, and lots of reasons to sort of fill time such that it wasn't obvious to me. And I think that's for anyone sort of working in the larger organizations, where your next title is kind of preordained to an extent. So you sort of perform in a certain way and your title changes from A to B to C to D. That's great, and working in great kind of large companies is brilliant actually. But I think sometimes that there is a bit of a sort of a bailout clause where you don't force yourself to self-reflect enough because of that.
And because I'm almost thinking that there's probably a scale of passive reflection, or maybe even little to passive to active, and then maybe perhaps we're all across that scale. What enables you to move towards more active reflection, say from passive? What would you say? Because it's probably a journey that we all have to kind of go on. What has helped you kind of move along that?
I think maturity, a good network in terms of chatting to other people in similar roles, different roles, that kind of taking stock conversation with yourself or others. I was very lucky to have certainly one employer who, and you'd be familiar with some of these, John, who invested a huge amount of time, energy, and actually talent development. And I was lucky to be sort of part of a lot of them. So you were spending weeks away from your sort of day-to-day job with lots of people who were sort of in the non-physical sense, sort of drilling into your subconscious to actually, who are you? What do you want to be? What are your core values? And I think that definitely helped me surface a lot of stuff that I was probably very good at bearing, quite frankly, in terms of actually just not having a kind of an active thought process around your career. What would you like to get out of it? Where would you like to be sort of in a couple of years' time? So I was very lucky that, as I said, some of those sort of key talent development programs probably instilled more of a discipline in me, or more of a conscious rather than unconscious, that actually kind of set a lot of building blocks around thinking about yourself for yourself, as opposed to, again, I think sometimes the end state, if I sort of reflect on some of my own thoughts, when you're on that sort of yellow brick road that I refer to, I think it's very easy to be distracted by the end state, as opposed to actually, and it can actually be a distraction from the day to day, and actually the ability to self-reflect, where you have this guiding light, which sometimes actually can blind you. So again, I think personally, I've been very lucky with some of those talent development programs that actually kind of have instilled a thought process that you can now operate for yourself, and actually you don't require that sort of more structured conversation. You can actually have it with yourself. And even if I think of more recent times, right, I've been working from home for the last 5 or 6 months in lockdown, and actually the kind of cliche which I'm hearing bandied around, which I do buy into a little bit, is don't let a good crisis kind of pass you by. Working from home has definitely allowed me to self-reflect on stuff that I mightn't have otherwise done. You know, working like a lot of others virtually, we're on calls, speaking to a screen for a lot of the day. That's definitely allowed me to say, well, actually, what are the bits of my job I like, and actually, what do I miss about not being in the office? And that definitely allows you to, not entirely objectively, but certainly almost assess your own job. And I personally, I miss the banter with people. I get energy from other people and other people's enthusiasm, and actually, some of the techniques I've sort of tried to do is, how can I replace that energy with other stuff that ranges from Joe Wicks for 20 minutes in the morning to bad golf in the evening. I lost 3 balls yesterday evening. So it's certainly, there's always opportunities for self-reflection, and actually I think COVID is a great one for everybody. So that's why some of these conversations are hopefully very timely for a lot of people.
For sure. Well, what's interesting in that though as well is, like, say, the self-reflection, it sounds like there's almost 2 forms of self-reflection. And when it comes to choices, there's obviously a choice to move, but then there can be a choice to try and enhance and reshape and evolve your current role. Just as we're talking out loud, what's more important, do you think, or is there equal weight to both? Like looking at the existing role and trying to maximize and shape it, or potentially looking at the longer term landscape and also saying, is there other choices? Or
I think it's a little bit of both. Like, I think again, the longer you sort of get in your career, I think you are more focused on, well, actually, where would I really like to get then? And that isn't an end state. I'm going to throw the cliche. John, you'll be familiar with this from some of your online yoga classes. The journey kind of is the reward to an extent, in terms of it's not about the end state, but actually, where do you really see yourself? And I guess what you get job satisfaction from, quite frankly, you know, we all get it from the jobs we're currently in, but what is sort of the real job? Where would I like to be? And then once you have that sort of fairly set in stone, or set as it can be in your mind, it's then about actually, okay, does my current job serve that needs in terms of giving it the experience and the challenges particularly, and the opportunity to grow? And the answer might be yes, maybe, but for a short period, or yes, for a long period. So again, it's kind of focused on how can I continue to invest in myself to get to where I want to get. That's not a destination per se, but it's actually, what is the role that would really sort of bring me the most amount of challenge that I would like, and the most amount of job satisfaction. And to go back to one, I think it's become somewhat job agnostic or employer agnostic to an extent, obviously, that, you know, every company has unique selling points in terms of culture and everything else, but it becomes a little bit more job agnostic. I think it's more around, where I'm currently am, does that serve my needs for ability to invest in myself and others? And that can vary from yes and no to for a short or long period of time. So again, it's more that guiding light of the end state, and actually critically evaluating where you are versus that, rather than the stay or go proposition.
Yeah. Yeah, because stay or go is very black and white. Whereas I think this invest in yourself, which you've mentioned a few times, like that almost sounds like it's perennial. That sounds like it's a forever journey a little bit. Like, how much is that phrase being important in terms of your choices? Yeah.
Massively. And like, one of the other sort of big ones that I'd put an emphasis on. I love feedback, and actually what informs my self-reflection a lot is feedback, right? And I've seen certainly myself, and I've seen lots of brilliant people. We all have blind spots, right? And what I sort of have become more mature about is I see a lot of people, and I've seen it myself. It's very easy, or it's easier rather than being very easy, to play to your strengths. So you're good at something, repeat as many times as you can. I'm kind of oversimplifying, and actually that will get you to a place where might be success for you or satisfaction for you. But I think it's maybe a bit of a non-Irish sort of concept, where actually getting balanced feedback from others and giving it to others is really, really helpful. If you're going to, again, one of my phrases is kind of love your weaknesses. Actually, the bits where you're not strongest on, it's not that you're going to become the best at them, or you need to be the best at them, but actually to kind of round yourself out. And that's what I kind of link that to the concept of investing in yourself, to round yourself out and really sort of make the most of yourself, and actually get a huge amount of satisfaction. If you look at something, I think actually, geez, 5 years ago I would have made a mess of this, or I was very uncomfortable doing it, or even thinking about it. It's quite frankly, it scared me, or you know what, I knew I was crap at it. They're the kind of the personal satisfaction I get out of something, in terms of you've leaned into a weakness or a development point, and actually that has really served you. So they're the kind of bits that certainly have helped me in terms of when I talk about sort of that investing piece. It's very much around where can I get experience, but equally, I guess you're setting yourself challenges in terms of development points that, look, I would like to develop this, and where is the best place to give me the opportunity and the challenge to do that.
I guess the phrase now that's coming up is like awareness. Like, you strike me that there's a huge level of awareness of what you want to invest in, what you want to grow into, let's say. How important has a growth of awareness been in terms of informing your choices, both to move roles and also to shape the roles that to choose how you shape the role that you're in?
Massive. Like, I think if I kind of think of a logical flow, I think that and again, I may think I'm very self-aware. I may not be, right? I could be successfully deluding myself, but I think the more self-awareness, I think this goes to sort of profession and non-profession, the more self-aware you can be about yourself, that allows you to sort of as credibly and objectively as you can actually self-reflect, in terms of, you know, you're very self-aware. This is where I am. I think self-awareness allows you to look at other people and say, actually, I like what that person does. I see what they've done there. I see the strategy, and I actually like that. So I think the more self-awareness, personally, professionally, you can get, and again, another cliche or acronym, but you know, I think that the more successful are the people who can combine the IQ and the AQ as much as they possibly can. Like it's the combination of the two of them together, or sorry, EQ rather than AQ together, yeah, is sort of the piece you're really, that is where I think the magic happens. Gotcha. Where you can kind of bring the two of them together. And I think certainly the EQ piece is definitely around self-awareness for me personally.
No, I guess we're all at different stages of life, and yet we all have to make career choices at different stages of life. And, you know, obviously time can play a role in awareness because it gives us more time. What about like earlier stages of your career, perhaps in the absence of the depth of awareness that you have now, let's say, or maybe not, perhaps, I don't know, you please tell me. What do you do in that scenario around trying to make a choice? You mentioned like the phrase leap of faith seemed to be more of a feature. I'm only guessing that it's earlier, but you can correct me if I'm wrong or right. But what do you do, maybe perhaps where awareness is only at a certain level, let's say, and not the level that you have today?
I think there's a balance to be struck between seeking counsel, right, and how much value attached to that counsel versus actually just informing yourself. So I think if I was to sort of go back in time and maybe to kind of frame the question as how might I do it differently, it's definitely, if I'm looking at opportunities and actually, okay, well, what does 5 years post that opportunity look like? Identify people who have sort of gone through that journey and actually seek them out and sort of seek their counsel. Well, what does it look like? This is my perception of what it looks like and what it might look like in 5 years' time. Can you help me understand it? And really, I suppose, self-educate. And it's probably something, again, if I say I took a leap of faith, it was probably through a lack of self-education around it. So I'm going to sing from your hymn sheet a little bit here, John, but I think the power of sort of having that network of people you can actually reach out to, and it's not the network you ring sort of 2 weeks into an interview process saying, would you mind giving me a steer on something? It's actually people you're maintaining that sort of network, which is very much personal, professional, sort of intertwined, but actually people who you're helping out as much as you can, you're doing favors for, they're sort of repaying the favor, and actually you have enough people in your phone book, you're very comfortable picking up the phone to dropping you, have you got 5 minutes for a coffee? And you have enough goodwill or sort of trust with that person that yes, they typically have 5-10 minutes to sort of bounce something. It's having, I guess, a lot of people you can bounce stuff off, and equally you're sort of reciprocating whenever you can. I think that's, if I kind of go back in time, the power of the network to sort of help on career choices is something I wouldn't have been as aware of that I would have liked to have been, with the benefit of hindsight, something I would have invested more and actually leveraged more to kind of self-educate before making career choices.
Mm. And I definitely agree with you on that, man. It's helped me in every stage of life. How do you given how important career choices are, how do you kind of know within that network who's a good person? Like, what's the characteristics or what's the criteria that kind of helps to identify, who is a good person to chat to within the network, or does it depend?
I think it depends, but I think there's kind of a few different dimensions of it. If I think of my current role and sort of who are the different sort of not points of attack, but the people I would sort of value speaking to. It's somebody who's close to the epicenter of where I might be headed. I think that's sort of a clear and kind of obvious one. And again, to the extent you know somebody who might be in the role, has been in the role previously, has worked within that team, or ideally sort of in that role, that's massively powerful. And again, some say opportunities I've looked at and maybe haven't pursued, the ability to speak to somebody who've actually done the job or know somebody directly who has, and you can sort of make that connection. But that's the closer you can get to the epicenter of it is massive, because you're really getting sort of great intelligence to kind of inform you. This feels like a good idea. Is it a good idea? And actually, what do I need to know about it to sort of arm yourself with, to be able to kind of do your own analysis on, does it make sense for me or not? So I think that's kind of an obvious one. It's then maybe taking a step back if I'm looking at larger organizations. Well, they all have their unique selling points, but does the culture appeal to me? And actually, is it a fit for me? And I think that's very, very important. And maybe not, for anyone sort of looking at career choices, I would say not every job is for you, and actually don't feel that jobs shouldn't pass you by because they're simply just not a fit for you, and that's okay. So it's, as I said, I don't really have a thought process of next job. It's actually, how can I continue to build myself? And if I'm ticking those boxes and I'm happy with the culture and the fit, then it's something I'm interested in. But it's equally, again, I think that the more experience you get much more comfortable with sort of opportunities passing you by and being sort of firm, and sometimes I've never been in the situation, every job I've been in, I've loved, and yes, there's been harder times and easier times, but I've never been in a position where I've wanted to do anything other than reluctantly leave that job because of the people I work with and actually the great work. So that has helped me in terms of, you don't have a bias towards, I need to get out here. I've been very lucky, I've never had that. But again, I think the culture and the fit and the concept of jobs passing you by is some people should get comfortable with, that actually they're not all for you, and actually don't sort of chase every car on the street. That be selective, do your research, and actually there is no rush in the grand schemes. You're going to be working for 40 years, so actually if it takes time to find a job, you're looking for, if I look at my current role, there was probably a 2-year path to sort of landing, and there would have been some sort of upskilling needed in certain parts, and that was, I won't say it was a master plan, but there was some sort of a credible plan which allowed me to sort of springboard to the job I have currently. So again, don't sort of be impatient about it, and be comfortable that not every job is for you.
And there's definitely a question I'd love to follow up on that, if I may, Niall. And I just want to check in your time. How are you for 2 more questions, if I may?
Yeah, I'm fine. Fire away. No problem.
Thank you. So the first is, I think in this world, probably more than ever, like you're saying, and I really like the advice, is don't feel that you have to go for that job or whatever the case may be. There's loads of kind of distractions out there telling us, maybe it could be friends, it could be family, certainly could be social media telling us about, what's a good job, or, that's a great opportunity there now for you. How do you protect yourself from that, I don't know how you describe it, like, I suppose those soundings, to be able to hear what's coming from here, here, and here, particularly when that soundings can be quite loud and quite strong?
I think they're not a bad thing in terms of that they will catch your eye and possibly bring you in a direction that makes sense for you and works for you. But it's kind of being comfortable with your own judgment to a large extent, with the benefit, and maybe I did fully answer your, with the benefit of counsel from lots of people. I spoke with people who might be in the job, people who know the company. Personally, based on sort of the roles I've done, I will speak to people who are advisors to some sort of jobs that I've looked at. So you're kind of getting it, well, actually, what does it look from the other side in terms of, or you'll sort of speak to people in that industry or people who do similar jobs in other roles or industries, that actually what does it look like from your side? So getting, without sort of boiling the ocean, but I think if I look at sort of my younger self, the concept of spending 10, 15, 20 hours Googling all the products and services that a company sells and buys or whatever it does in terms of operations and all the locations, that's fine, right? But I don't think you can sort of say job well done on sort of preparation and diligence if you're doing that and that only. You kind of need to go to that awkward place of, geez, I have a friend on LinkedIn and actually you can see your friend at Airs works such and such. They're the sort of piece of intelligence that'll help you get the job if it's for you, and equally just inform you around, is it a fit for me? It's kind of putting yourself into those awkward places or positions a little bit where you just need to stretch yourself a little bit, and actually, an hour spent figuring out if they've got an office in Malaysia or Singapore versus actually 20 minutes of an uncomfortable coffee chat with somebody you've never met. For me, one is the tenfold sort of value of the other, or has the potential to be at least. So it's kind of going that extra piece and not fooling yourself and thinking, if I spend 5 hours on the website, I'm going to know it inside out and I've got it. It's the other sort of gems that you need to work a little harder to unearth, is kind of, I think, what sets you up a little bit better.
Okay, well, look, a little quick follow-up on that. That requires bravery and courage. How do you muster the bravery and courage to put in that email, to put in that call, to do whatever the case may be, to try and set it up? Because for some people that won't come naturally. What's been, from your experience anyway, like how?
I think part of the short answer is I guess neck to an extent, right? In terms of, you don't know somebody, but actually it kind of goes back to the point. The more helpful things and favors you can do for people, like it's kind of the circle of life. If you can help people out, ranging from, I've got a son who wants to sort of do a transition replacement, to actually, people who say, would you mind looking at my CV, to whatever it is, would you mind looking at my tax return, or whatever it is. The more people you can sort of build in your network and sort of build friendships with, and sort of real friendships, as opposed to the more goodwill you have with the more people, I think that builds your network such that actually you can ask people. But I think a lot of it's just being brave. Like as I said, particularly with the large organizations, you can follow the crowd a little bit, and that not in any way a bad thing, but actually you do very much without making an obsession. You do need to chart your own course, right? You're going to be working 40 years. You might as well get as much job satisfaction out of it as possible. So I think it's kind of owning your own career, charting your own course, and investing in yourself. The investment is high when you sort of need to think about a career change, but I suppose you have to. Again, I very much use the idea of, I'm going to be working 40 years. I want to make the most out of it and actually enjoy it as much as possible. And don't be afraid. Like everyone has been in the same situation and will be in the same situation. So any sort of uncomfortableness is temporary, right? And it's not unique to anybody. Everybody's in the same situation one or several times in their career.
And against the backdrop of that, like, context, that we are working for 40 years and increasing job satisfaction it sounds like a very healthy goal to aim for. And therefore, in that backdrop, being brave to reach out to that person makes total sense then. The last question, changes of career path, like, from your experience, and I don't know, would you constitute your last change a change in career path? From the outside it might look yes, but correct me if I'm wrong again. What's involved in making a good choice, particularly when you change? It involves a change in career path. So again, please correct me if I'm wrong, if it would not be regarded as a change in path.
Yeah, I think if I kind of go all the way back and maybe a slightly tangential way of answering the question. I would have moved into taxation at sort of right at the kind of the crest of the sort of Celtic Tiger wave, and would have moved from one big four to another. And jobs are easy to get, right? It was an easy time. I thought I might like taxation. Did I know much about it? Not really. I distinctly remember going up in the elevator with the interviewer from the employer I was moving to. Jobs were sort of freely available sort of within the finance community. And I distinctly remember looking over his shoulder in the elevator. He's a great guy, and he wouldn't mind ever hearing this. He'd one question written on the page: why not your current employer, right? So we went into the interview room. He asked me the one question that I had the benefit of 2 minutes to prepare for. I answered it. And the next question was, when do you need to start? It was a very soft landing into sort of an area that I thought I liked, didn't really have any experience in. And it was all very easy. And that was great. 6 months later, we had a large recession. And actually, I was trying to upskill in something that I really knew very little about. And actually, I was seen as a very medium-term investment. And actually, it was a very difficult time. The bubble for me definitely burst. That actually I was now finding it hard to sort of find jobs in the area that I was really only sort of cutting my teeth on. And it was a dark enough 3 or 4 years. And actually, certainly self-esteem, confidence, everything was reduced because of it. And actually, part of that is I ended up working with smaller firms sort of outside of your traditional sort of big names, international corporate. And it was, with the benefit of hindsight, it was the best thing that ever happened to me in terms of becoming more commercial, more personal, more confident. And again, it's stuff I would never change, because it was one of the best things that ever happened to me. That actually that bubble kind of burst alongside a lot of other people's bubbles in terms of the Celtic Tiger. But it forced you to kind of just strip it back to your kind of bare balance sheet. Apologies for the kind of the accounting or finance term. What do I have here? And actually, what would I like to get? And actually, where am I going to get it? And it was definitely a road less traveled by for a couple of years. And I could see even with some colleagues and former colleagues, there was definitely this, what is he doing? And does he actually know what he's doing? Because he's gone off in a bit of a meandering path. And I won't say there was a map to go with the path, but it was definitely instilled in you a piece of actually, you do need to own your own career, and actually there will be tough times. And I think it definitely sets you up well for the likes of a COVID, having been through it before. And actually, it's probably an example of, I was brave to try and move from one sort of career discipline to another. It went incredibly badly for the first year or two, and it was quite bleak. You're sort of saying, well, I kind of had high ambitions myself, but I'm kind of going nowhere here. I'm going sideways or backwards or whatever it is. And I guess it took a reason to kind of dust yourself off and say, actually, I still know where I'm going, right? And this is a step on the way, and actually, I'm going to get there. And actually, so for me, that was actually very helpful and instrumental in just building a bit more grit and confidence, and working with people I might not have worked with, who I learned a huge amount about. So a great overall kind of life experience that I definitely wouldn't change.
Well, I love the perseverance, and again, I'm hearing in the story the piece around what do I want to get. Like, that question seems to be like a key one, and perhaps that's just an observation. I'm very mindful of the time, and I almost feel this is going to be hard for you to answer, to encapsulate everything we spoke about. But however, what would be your overriding point, like your mantra point on career choices, as we close off the conversation? What would you say is the real point that you feel stands out to you when it comes to making career choices?
I think there's probably 2 or 3 points around. As I said, job satisfaction is so important, right? So maximize it, and as objectively as one can converse with oneself. Think about what actually on a day-to-day, what do you get job satisfaction from? And there'll be stuff you don't get it from, right? And that's just part of a lot of jobs, and that's life. But what do I get job satisfaction from? And actually, how can what am I good at? What could I get better at? And actually, what's the complete package for me in terms of the most amount of job satisfaction, and how can I get there, or what do I need to do to get there? And it's, as I said, it's standing back from your own career as much as you can and being objective around, as opposed to, I think there's definitely a tendency, and I was guilty of it for many years. I was just following the masses a little bit, and not that that's a bad thing, and not that it sends you in a wrong direction, but actually, and again, it's making it not making it a healthy or unhealthy obsession. Don't be sort of obsessed with the end state or the end goal. Career is important, but actually, that rounded personality, I think, actually sets you up for a better career as being obsessed with your career, quite frankly. So they're probably a piece for me, and prepare properly and forensically for any sort of, if you are minded to sort of make a job change for the right reasons around, I think I can get more to myself or better challenges in a different role. You do need to prepare to the nth degree on it, and it is the softer, more awkward stuff, as I said, is trying to get the intel. They are the pieces that I think the expectation around the interview process and recruitment has gone up, right? Because there's so much publicly available information. People expect more of you, and there is more information available, so you can sort of rise to that challenge. But it's being clever in terms of how you prepare for it's getting counsel from the right people as to, okay, does it make sense for me to move at a point in time? But form your own view, and if the answer is yes, it does make sense, do smart diligence as opposed to diligence which will, it might get you the job, it might inform you a lot, but actually, as I said, it might allow you to get the job, but does it actually inform you enough to get you confident that it is the right job for you? And I think they're two different things. There's passing the employer test, but actually passing your own test. And I think that they're not mutually exclusive, but you need to tick both to actually really be comfortable this makes sense for me, and I've convinced the employer it makes sense for them or future employer, but does it actually make sense for me? So do your own diligence for your own benefit, as opposed to just passing the employer test. A long-winded answer, but there you go.
Yeah, it's brilliant, and like a lot of it comes down to kind of understanding what you want, and understanding is what you're looking at, the right thing for what you want. And there's a piece around hard work then in the preparation piece, and it's interesting that Elizabeth Fitzgerald and Kevin Duffy in the last episode of Career 7 Live talked about the hard work of making the choice of success once you've made it, and you're also giving a sense of hard work in terms of preparing for the interaction or the interview to actually get the choice over the line. So a big piece I've heard as well, Niall, is just the importance of stepping back and reflecting and understanding what's important for you as an individual. And I guess I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time to one, step back and reflect ahead of this, two, for definitely giving people brilliant food for thought about what they can do, particularly around this time, in stepping back and reflecting about what they want in their career. So I just want to say thank you very much. And it was supposed to be obviously with someone else, so the spotlight was on you, and I appreciate you being open enough to do that. So listen, Niall, thank you so much for taking the time. I hope you've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed it a lot, and I know people are going to get a lot from it. Thank you, man.
Great. Thanks very much, John. Really enjoyed the chat. So thanks very much.
Spot on, Niall. And I guess to just, I suppose, as I close off and finish up the live stream, thank you very much, everyone, to joining. This will be hosted on the Inspo YouTube channel, where you can see the previous interviews, and you can check out www.inspo.ie for upcoming chats and events. In the meantime, have a great afternoon, and hopefully we'll see you again soon. Thanks very much.